World is a department of divine whom professorship and who do not constitute elements of embarrassing divisions, but rather hierarchical steps for different cooperators. The edifying path unfolds for everyone. Here, caves are opened up in the productive soil. Over there, they browse through books for the world of the intelligence. But the Spirit is the living foundation of the manifested service. The workers are classified in different positions, but the field is only one. Realistically speaking, then, let no one be concerned with titles and awards, because the work is complex in all the sectors of dignifying activities, and the result is always the fruit of a well-lived cooperation. This is the reason why we conclude with Paul that the greatest victory of the disciple will be on the day that he presents himself to the Lord as an approved worker. This message made me think a lot about one other book that Chico wrote, but it was from a different spirit. The spirit was André Luiz, and the book titled is Nosso Lar, or we can translate to Our Home. When André Luiz passed away, and he went to this colony. The name of the colony is also the name of the book, Nosso Lar. When he first got there, and after he was taken care of and realized that he was dead or not dead, alive, he wanted to work. And he turned to one of the nurses there and he said, "Hey, I'm a doctor and I want to work at this hospital." And the nurse looked at him and very gently and nicely told him, you were a doctor of bodies on earth. Here, we first cure souls. Then we worry about the physical. We sometimes believe that our material life is what matter, and we end up forgetting about our soul, about our spirit. We forget that our physical body isn't going anywhere. Our physical body is staying here. And we want to prepare ourselves with beautiful clothing, with beautiful luxuries to present before God, and we forget that that's not what God wants from us. And this is what this message is telling us, that we should be working on our souls, we should be working on others, we should be working on our love, we should be working on our charity, our souls, and not on our material beliefs. And he's telling us the world is a department of the divine home. Each department has its own meaning. Each department has its own workers. Each department has its own understanding of how to pursue to the real world, to the real afterlife. And we tend to look at our friends or our neighbor or our loved ones, and we tend to not see them, and we tend to not care enough of what they do. We tend to look at the people who are our house cleaners or are picking up the trash, and we tend to look at them and despite what they're doing, because we want to feel more important than they are. But we all need each other. We need to work as a group to achieve something beyond this, something that is not material, it's not touchable, it's felt. The workers are classified in different positions, but the field is only one. We are all here working in different positions, but everyone is trying to achieve the same purpose. This is just beautiful and beyond any explanation. It's time to start working on ourselves before we try to work on others. It's time for us to look at what we're doing and look at others with more love, with more compassion. That's what God wants, and that's how that's what he's trying to show us. Stop being ashamed of what, if I clean toddlers' butt every day. And I'm not ashamed of that. And if I have to clean anything else in order to be more humble, that's what I should be doing. And there's no shame on that. I think that's, I don't know, what Emmanuel is trying to tell us. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all here. It's one of those final hot evenings of the year, maybe. Start getting cold again. It's good to be here. Thank you, Mariana, for the message before we started. Very good reflections on what we of the dignity of work, of service in general. Tonight's message, tonight's topic, it comes from the Gospel According to Spiritism in chapter 11. We have been studying this chapter for a few months now, probably about a year. Certainly since early this year. It's the chapter is called Love Your Neighbor as Yourself. And in the section that we're going to read today is the one on faith and charity. It's a message from the section of the chapter where it's direct letters or direct messages from spirits to those who were in those meetings, and these messages were compiled by Kardec into chapters that connected them together. So in this message, this spirit that only called himself or herself as a protecting spirit dictated this message in Krakow, Poland, in 1861, and it revolves around the issue or the actions of faith and charity, which really, is it a little loud? Hopefully the YouTube isn't capturing that. It's okay. Is it good? So the Spirit brings this concept of, and it seems like this Spirit has mentioned before in another meeting. It starts by saying, "My beloved children, a short while ago I said to you that charity without faith is not enough." It's not enough to maintain social order amongst men and women and be capable of making them happy. I could have said that charity without faith is not possible. So the Spirit is bringing up something that in the Bible and in the understanding of the translation of the Bible has been a subject of studies of many scholars of the Bible have studied this for a while because of the translations of the words and the meanings of the words faith, hope, and love. And in particular to where that comes from the Corinthians, the message to the Corinthians that Paul wrote, in one of his letters. So in his first letter to the Corinthians, he on chapter 13 is one of the most famous chapters of the New Testament. It's where Paul talks about love, talks about faith and hope, right? And this verse 13 in chapter 13 of this letter says, "And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." And why are we bringing this up? The concept of love, the concept of faith, is sometimes misunderstood, or it's left for interpretation a little bit of those who are studying it. And I love playing with languages. I love playing with words. So this subject is very interesting to me, because when we think of love and when we think of faith and when we think of charity, very often there's like a specific meaning to those words that come to our minds right away. So in love, when I say the word love, depending on who you are, depending on where you're coming from, or your situation that day even, you might think that love is something that a mother feels for her child, or, that a friend feels for another friend. It might be the love that a man feels for a woman, or a woman to a man, or vice versa, or like that sexual eros kind of love. Or you might think it's that fraternal love that people show to each other, right? But actually, and those are three definitions of love from Greek, or three different kinds of love that if you go back to the writings in Greek from 2,000 years ago, even, the language had four different kinds of love, right? And I mentioned the three of them. Eros, right, which is that sensual, sexual attraction, love. You got philia, which is, the root of the word Philadelphia. We say the city of brotherly love, which is the love that, people have for others in their community, others, around them, but that, that there is a brotherhood, that there's a connection, between that community or that group. There's also the love storge, which is that love that I said. It's the love of a mother for a child. Is the love of a mother for is the love of parents for children, or of family in general. And however, in this message from Paul, we actually have the fourth word for love, which comes from agape. Agape, which is the word used in Greek for this passage, where Paul is talking about love. He uses the word agape, which really means a lot more, which means a lot deeper connection, is a very different kind of love. And he felt that this was the time for him to explain really what that meant. So I thought I'd read a little bit of the passage because it really is one of the most beautiful pieces of text in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Paul talks, tries to paint the picture of what love and what charity is about. He says, verse 1, chapter 13, if I speak in the tongues, in the languages of men or angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. So when he's talking about the word love here, he's talking about this concept of agape, right? So as is understood, he's not talking about the love for another person. He's not talking about the love for your family. He's not talking about the love, the attraction that people have for each other. He's talking about a much deeper love, a love that requires, that is it's a love for humanity. It's the love that really describes what we believe, at least Spiritists, but I guess as Christians, we believe really what is meant to be love, right? It really comes from, it really means, benevolence. It means indulgence, so he's going to go through a few examples of what he means by all of the work that he's trying to do as a Christian, right? So in these letters, he's sending the messages to the early churches of the Christian faith, right? He's trying to spread Jesus' gospel around Greece and, trying to push it towards the rest of the world and, writing these letters. And, the understanding that we have of Jesus today, a lot of it comes from these letters and comes from the work of Paul, through all of his travels and everything that he left, because he really was the one that went outside of Jerusalem, outside of the Jews and the people of that lived around, what's now Israel, to spread the message, right? And he's trying to make sure that people understand what he means when we're talking about love, right? He says, if I do not have love, it doesn't matter if I understand the languages. It's not the language. It's not one man. It's not a few men. It's not one angel or a few angels. It's all of the languages, all of the languages of all of the men. And if I could speak all of the languages of all of the angels, even if I could do all of that, and I am, singing a song, I'm bringing the beautiful message of Jesus. If I do not have love, right? If I do not have agape, if I do not have this true, deep love for humankind, right? I am only a resounding gong. Now, a cymbal, right? It's one of those metal instruments. Now, it can sound very good. You can make beautiful music, right? With cymbals. It's important to make. It's an important part of making music. However, it really doesn't matter if what I'm doing is not full of agape. Right? Now, going back to the message here, where we started in chapter 11, it was really striking to me when I read what the Spirit had said here. It says, I could have said that charity without faith is not possible. Now, this charity that he's talking about here is very close to the agape, which is translated as love elsewhere, right? So if you read different versions of the Bible, in English or in different languages, sometimes that word will be translated a little closer to charity. Sometimes it will be translated a little closer to love. Because depending on the translator, they want to emphasize more the fact that if I have this kind of love, I am going to be a charitable person. Doesn't actually mean the charity. It just means that if I have this kind of love, if I live this kind of love, I am a charitable person. But again, because it's just a translation of a very short phrase, sometimes we get confused. But I read the message for tonight, and it said, and the Spirit said, I could have said that charity without faith is not possible, right? Now, if we understand that faith is really more about belief, or more about believing in God, or believing in a spirit, or believing in Jesus Christ, or believing in a prophet, right? The Spirit is saying here, without some faith, it's not possible to have charity. Now, this is, to me, sounded very confusing at first, because it sounded almost like he was trying to say, well, you're going to have to be faithful. You're going to have to believe. You're going to have to believe in God if you're going to be charitable. So it doesn't matter how good a person you are, if you don't have faith, you're not doing anything. It's not, what did he say? He says it's useless. Actually, he uses, the translation here, of course, it comes from French to English. So, yes, it says right here, my children, it is useless for a person. So I'm reading this, and it just doesn't really read right to me, because my initial inclination is to think that he's talking about faith as belief, right? Again, and love, he's actually talking about charity, but he's talking about charity, and my our initial understanding of the word charity is just giving something to somebody. And, now you read this and it says, well, why can't I just do charity without having to believe in anything? So, obviously that's not what he meant, because otherwise, all he would be doing here and would be saying, okay, you have to convert to some sort of faith before anything good that you do is good. Now, everything else that we read in this book and other books by Kardec actually, makes sense. This one didn't make sense to me. But, again, why I'm talking about language is because the reason why it didn't make sense is just because of so many definitions for these words. And so we really have to get down to really what's meant when he's saying faith and when he's saying charity, right? So back to Corinthians, and I'm sorry that I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit, but it's because both messages are very, very good, and I'm going to be doing a little more reading than might be expected for a lecture or a conversation like this, but the text is very powerful, so I wanted to just go look at some of these words. Verse number 2 in Corinthians 13, right? He says, if I have the gift of prophecy and I can fathom all of the mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. I am nothing without love. I am nothing. It doesn't matter if my faith can move mountains. Okay. So again, faith and love, and I'm sticking to this text here, which, by the way, is from the New International Version. There's different texts that instead of saying love here, it says charity. So keep that in mind. When I'm saying love, other people have translated as charity. If I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. So he's really, giving us, this is Paul trying to get everyone in the world to start listening to this Jesus Christ guy, right? I persecuted him a few years ago, got blinded, had to go talk to some guy. He took away my blindness, right? Because Jesus told him to do that. Fixed me. And now I'm telling the world about this guy. Great guy, Jesus Christ. Right? So his entire life after that is dedicated to really starting, the the first viral posts, right? It's these letters from Paul. These viral posts that spread around the world about this guy, Jesus Christ, right? So this would be his opportunity to be saying that, if I'm going to be good, all I got to do is only care about Christ. All I got to do is have faith, believe in Christ. That would be enough. Well, that's not what he's saying. And why is this one of the most powerful pieces in the Bible, right? It's because he's trying to tell us, right, that it's not what I do on the outside, right? It's not what I say I do. It's not even what I believe I can do, right? Jesus had said, if you have the faith the size of a grain of mustard, you could move those mountains, right? So if your faith was even that big, you could move the mountains. And what he's saying here is, even if I had that kind of faith without love, that's not enough. I am nothing. He says, I am nothing. Number 3, if I give all I possess to the poor, right? So that would be charity, and give over my body to hardship, so that I may boast. It's like, really, boast is actually, the translation says here, some manuscripts say, as if my body was turning into flames, right? Even if I did everything for my life to be harder, because I'm giving it away to other people, and I'm getting sick, I'm getting bloated, or burning. He says, if I do not have love, I gain nothing. Right? So imagine somebody saying, from today on, I've signed all of my bank accounts, I've given away everything that I had to people who need it more than I do, and I'll just find a way to live. Right? There's nothing more charitable in the sense of being able to give something than giving everything that you have. Right? You would be a charitable person. Right? He's still saying, if I'm doing that without love, I gain nothing. So what is Paul trying to say to us here? Right? He's really trying to inspire us to look at giving oneself, from oneself to others, as something that is core of what we do. Right? It's core in me to have this feeling of agape, right, of love for humankind, so that what I do for others really makes a difference, and I can gain something from that. Right? He's actually talking about himself. Right? Remember, the chapter 11 is the chapter we're studying. It says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Just like, we heard a couple weekends ago about love. It's like, if you can't learn to love yourself, how can you learn to love others like you love yourself? If you don't love yourself, how can you do that? How do you know what it means to love others? So he's saying, if I don't have that kind of love, I gain nothing. So how can I do something for myself, right? Love myself, if I'm not transferring that or having that love. Now, he goes on in the next 3 or 4 verses to define what it means to love, or what love means, right? So from 4 to 7, he says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, right? It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs, right? So we talked about, again, the 4 different kinds of the words that get translated to love today, right? The different kinds of love, the brotherly love, fraternal love, family love, or erotic love. And what he's saying here is, he's trying to explain this other kind of love, is the love that means that I'm patient, right? I'm not waiting for others to give me something back, right? You could say that the family love is something that you have, that you feel like giving back to those in your family, but you also expect something from them. Certainly, the eros love is something that only works if it's mutual, right? The brotherly love is a sort of respect that everybody has to have for each other, for things to work, right? It's, it's the community in case of, trying to make things work. But, he's talking here about a love that's just patient. It's just kind. It does not get angered. It does not keep record of wrongs, because it has no wrongs to keep record of. If I am talking about charity, if I am talking about, this love that he's trying to, that Paul is talking about, it's a love that transcends, our typical human needs, our typical human material needs, right? And I'll finish these next two here. So 6 and 7. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Right? Love does not delight in evil. So how many of us, right, growing up as a kid, and still sometimes we get that little bit of pleasure, right, which the Germans have a word for it, with the Schadenfreude, right, which means, enjoying the suffering of others, enjoying when something doesn't work for others, right? So he's saying love does not leave room for that. Love does not leave room for me to be delighted in anything that affects others, right? Anything that's evil. But love rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. So I mark the word trust here because the topic of the evening is still faith and charity, right? And I keep talking about love. But we'll come back to our message here a little bit, like I said. Coming back and forth just a little bit. So our protecting spirit says, yes, my children, it is useless for a person, right? So he says here, charity without faith is not possible. And then he clarifies it a little bit. Nevertheless, unadorned charity, which is, charity that you wouldn't be showing off, which can only be practiced with abnegation and the constant sacrifice of all selfish interests, can only be inspired by faith, because nothing but faith can give humanity the courage and perseverance needed to carry the cross of terrestrial life. So he's starting to explain to us what he means by faith in this case here, right? He says charity without faith is not possible. Unadorned charity, right, the one with abnegation and constant sacrifice, really you couldn't achieve that without faith. Again, faith cannot be used as just belief, right? If it was just belief, then you would still say, well, there's a lot of people out there that won't claim they believe in God, that won't claim they believe in Jesus or Muhammad or whatever, or whichever prophet, and yet they're still doing good. Right, so how is it that jives, right? If God is really all about justice, then why is it that faith, that believing in Him or in His prophets is a requirement, right? So that was still not very clear. So in the next paragraph, he then goes, "Yes, my children, it is useless for a person who is always eager for pleasure to try to delude themselves as to their destiny on this planet by pretending they are justified in occupying themselves exclusively with their own pleasure." So he's saying it's useless, right? If you think you're going to be happy without, and that your only destiny in this planet is to find ways to make yourself feel good, to give yourself the pleasures of this life or the pleasures of material life, then you're just deluding yourself, right? So he's being very clear with the reader and the receivers of the message that you're not going to find, and he goes on to say, you're not going to find happiness in that, right? So loving your neighbor as yourself, right? He's kind of relating it back that if you're looking for happiness, if happiness is your goal in life, looking at just yourself is also not enough, right? So you got to learn to love yourself. You got to learn to understand what love means, and to love oneself. But if all you do is focus on what are your pleasures and your own, exclusively your own pleasure, thinking that that's all you got to do in this planet, in this life, then you are really just being useless. Well, I guess you're just being deluded. So he says, beyond doubt, God created us to be happy in eternity, right? And he talks about how life in this earth is really for our improvement, is for our growth, is for our evolution, if you will, in the meaning of spiritual evolution, right? But he's saying, I guess he's trying to point out that sometimes we think that means that happiness is just something in the future. If we keep thinking that the earth is a place for trials and tribulations, and I'm going to have trials, I'm going to have tribulations, it's going to be hard, then I'm not going to be happy. He's saying there is no reason to say that we're not intended to be happy in this world, right? He says, on the contrary, you would be right to affirm that humanity is intended to be happy in this world, right? So he's addressing us who are, and to our own right, looking to better our lives, looking to have a better material means and condition, right? And he's saying that you're here, you're learning, and that's all part of what we have to do. And he's not saying that that's not okay, but he is saying that if that's where you're going to look for happiness, then you're just wasting your time, right? He says it's useless to do this. He says, however, you would be right to say that humanity was intended to be happy in this world. However, you can only be right that humanity is going to be happy in this world if happiness is not being sought in material pleasures, right? It says, as long as this is sought not in material pleasures, but in goodness, then you could say, yes, humanity can be happy. So we struggle through life, right? We struggle through, our selfishness, our pride, our vanity. Life is full of difficult situations. Life is full of tribulations. So, it is common for us to conclude that we're not going to be happy because of that. And he's saying, no, that's not really what the goal of humanity is for this world. It is okay to believe, or it's really okay to even affirm that it's our goal to be happy. Humanity's goal to improve and to be happy, right? The problem is just where you're looking for that happiness, right? Where are we looking for the happiness? And he says it's in, you're going to find that in goodness. And he says the history of Christianity tells us of martyrs going happily to their execution. Today in our society, there's no longer a need for Christians to face the Holocaust of martyrdom, nor the sacrifices of lives, but only and exclusively the sacrifice of selfishness, pride, and vanity. So we no longer have to sacrifice, our life in this world, right? We are descendants, or we have the fortune of having had the Christian message passed down in in 2,000 years, in the last 2,000 years, right? All the way to us, and a lot of people that defended this message, defended it with their lives, died, with the lions, died wherever it was in different situations throughout the centuries. And today we don't have to do that anymore. But what he's saying, right, what the Spirit is the protecting Spirit is saying here is that there is no happiness without sacrifice, right? And he believes that the Christians of the times that were being persecuted and killed for being Christians, they were happy to, many of them were happy to give their lives for the cause, right? But we are only required to sacrifice three very simple things: selfishness, pride, and vanity. Very simple, right? Very, very simple. Three little things. That's all we got to sacrifice. We don't actually have to go face a lion. We don't have to go face fire, right? We just have to face, our selfishness, our pride, and our vanity. Selfishness was the message from last month, I think. So he says, well, that's very simple, right? Of course, if it was, we wouldn't have to be studying. We wouldn't have to be thinking of how do we apply this message, right? All we got to do is say, well, wherever I have vanity, I'm going to kill it. Wherever I have pride and selfishness, I'm just going to, give my all to others. I will just, I won't be selfish anymore. And I won't be proud. You can say whatever you want about me. I'm not going to be proud anymore. But then we go back to Paul and remember that he said, even if I gave all of my possessions without love, I wouldn't be anything. I am nothing. So why do we keep coming back and forth here, right? The message from the Spirit finishes like this: you will triumph only if you are inspired by charity and sustained by faith. So I'd like to just, again, merge the two concepts here because of, the translation of the words here. He is talking about the same thing that Paul is talking about, right? We're talking about that fourth kind of love, that love for humanity, that love that is patient and it's kind, right? The love that does not envy. That's the kind of love that he means by that needs to inspire you, right? So it's that love that allows you to be charitable or makes you charitable because you have this love. It's not like you do the charity and then that shows that you love. It's the love that just means that you are charitable in your day-to-day. Now, that's the invitation that Paul has for us. So he says, he continues talking about that love and says, love never fails, but there are prophecies, they will cease, right? These prophecies that talk about things that are going to be, that can be a problem for us in our lives, right? Love will not fail us, right? Love does not fail you. The prophecies will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled, right? So, if all I'm doing is talking about love, or if all I'm doing is talking about Jesus, or all I'm doing is talking of all of these in all different languages, trying to say beautiful things, he's saying love is, it goes above all of that, right? Where there's knowledge, it will pass away. Because today, and that's what he's saying, This love is sublime, it's spiritual, in a way that he says, for we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. What he's saying is that what we know today, what we know in this life, what we can know in this life, is just a part. It's just a small part of it, and everything we know, everything we learn, really, it's as if we're looking through a mirror. It's as if we're looking at a reflection, or in some translations, as if we're looking through a dark glass. But, and then he says, when I become a man, when I was a child, I talked like a child, thought like a child, and reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. So he's saying, think of where you are today, or where we are as Christians, or where we are as religious, or followers of some religion, or some moral philosophy, and think of it as the evolution of being a child and growing to be an adult, right? It says, when you are an adult, when I become an adult, right, I put the ways of childhood behind me. When I achieve this kind of love, I have achieved basically what's the apex of spiritual maturity. When I become a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. So he's really showing us, or talking to us about, this is the absolute goal for us as Christians. It's the goal for us as followers of the message of Christ. But those of us that are trying to better ourselves, right? We will better ourselves when we've achieved this, as he says, just as in the way that I've put childhood behind me. I've grown from a child, the loves that we know, the other three kinds of love that we know, are like we're children. Right? He's saying this is a little different. You will stop treating, when you understand this kind of love, you are no longer treating in, childhood thoughts, right? And then he says, for now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So, the invitation of joining, the call of Christ, right? The call of this human love for humanity that Christ invites us to, is really what is the change that he's looking for from us, and is the change that really us as seekers of our own improvement, our own betterment, our own love, right? We need to get an understanding and an appreciation, and grow to reach this love that he talks about. And in the end, he says, as I read before, and now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So we started from faith and charity, right? So now we can say this charity and this love really mean the same thing. It's not the love that we commonly think of. It's not the charity that we normally think of. It's that love for humanity that really transcends the idea that you're giving anything, because you're just living the love, right? So, and then we come back to that the original statement here that says charity without faith is not possible. And really, to understand that, and to finally kind of just wrap up the meaning of the message here, we stop a little bit to think about the word faith, right? In this message, from Paul. He says faith, hope, and love. We'll see if we have time to talk about hope, but faith, the word that's translated as faith here actually comes from the word fides, right, which really is the essential element of the character of a person in public life. So this kind of faith is more like in the word, fidelity, or when you say in good faith, right? So I'm going to sign a contract with you, and I say I'm going to buy this expensive thing from you, and we're going to shake our hands in good faith that I will do that, right? So I promise, and you can trust me, right? So it's that trust, it's that confidence, right? If we break the word confidence, there's the word fide in there. Con, as in with, fidens, like with faith, with this kind of faith. So this faith that we're talking about here, as defined by Paul in the Greek words that he chose, really is not faith in believing that Jesus is God, believing in God himself, none of that. It's about trust. It's about confidence. It's about trusting, trusting love itself, trusting divinity, trusting that what you have to do is, it's like I always say this when my oldest kid, he was 3 or 4 maybe. I asked him one day, like, why do we do the right thing? Right? We were talking about, doing what's right. And I asked him, why do we do the right thing? And he looked at me and says, well, because that's the right thing to do. So the right thing to do is just obvious, right? Trust, this kind of faith here is what he's saying here, is that trust that what is good is just obvious, right? So if I have that trust, and so now if we go back to this, right? Without faith is not possible. So if I don't understand, if I don't trust that happiness, even in this world, is completely disconnected from anything material, right? Even in this world, true happiness is not material, right? If I don't trust that, if I don't truly believe that, then that's what he's saying. You cannot do charity. It's not that you can't give something to somebody. It's you can't learn that love that Paul was talking about. Can't trust that it's real. Can't trust in humanity. Can't trust, the plan that God has for us, however you want to define that. If you can't trust that, there is no charity. There may be gifts that you're giving to others. That may be a good feeling that you feel because you gave to somebody else. There may be, benefits from that. I mean, if you go and you feed somebody and they're hungry and you feed them, there's benefits to that. But if there's no love, then there's not much for you, right? And so that's really the message that they were trying to bring to us. And, I like translations. I like playing with words. I'd love to know more languages, but un poquito más. Well, I mean, that's. I guess I could talk a little bit about the hope, right? So in hope, because we were talking mostly about faith and charity, just because that was the theme, and faith in this concept of agape. In hope, really the thought that I had to talk about in hope here is it comes from this this concept that you trust, right? So there's a story. So with faith, right, with fidelity, it's like, Haroldo tells us the story, and to explain really what the meaning of the word fides means, right? In fidelity and in faith. That kind of faith and trust is like, the idea that we can't fly, right? I can't fly, nobody can fly. Well, we can get into an airplane and it's going to get us somewhere. It's not going to go on the ground. It's magical. You go up there. Somehow you make it down, right? Safest mode of transportation. Most people when I was growing up were afraid of the idea, right? It's more common today to take flights as a kid. So, kids remember doing it as a kid. But, back in the day when there weren't a lot of people that flew, and, I guess there's probably still a lot of people today that are afraid of flying, right? Because they can't believe that that's possible. They'll have trouble going into an airplane. So there's the story of a little old lady goes in for her flight, sits in the front row, and right next to her sits a little kid, and the little kid she's painting. She's painting. So the lady is scared, strapped herself in, is really freaking out, very nervous. They close the door. She's starts feeling claustrophobic too, and the little kid is sitting right next to her in the middle seat and just painting or like coloring a coloring book. And the lady goes and asks the kid, "How can you be coloring? Like, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that the airplane's gonna fall down? Like, how do you know this is going to be okay?" And she said, and the kid said, "No, I'm not afraid. I have faith, right? I have trust." She said, "But how do you do that? Like, how is that possible?" She said, "Well, my dad's a pilot, and he's in there piloting the airplane. My dad's gonna do this." So, like there's no question in her mind that's just gonna happen, right? The guy, that's his job. He goes up and down, but the lady is freaking out because this might or might not, work, right? And of course, when it shakes and when it trembles and everybody gets even more scared, right? Because nobody's scared of flying anymore because it doesn't look cool to say that I'm afraid. But the minute the airplane starts shaking, everybody's ready to to jump out of the airplane or something. Anyways, so that's the sort of faith that we're talking about. Now, the hope, right, is requires you to have faith to begin with, right? The hope is that expectation that you're going to get there, right? I mean, I'm not there yet, right? I'm taking the airplane here. I'm going to Brazil or whatever. Like, the trust is, the faith is, I know the pilot's going to do his job. The hope is, I'm going to be in Brazil in 20 hours or however long it's going to take me. I'll be there. That's hope, right? It's like, I'm not there yet. I don't know for sure. And it's possible that I might not get there. But that's the plan. That's true hope, right? It's, I already paid the ticket. So it's going to happen, right? That's the true hope that we're talking about here. It's not I hope that the plane doesn't fall. That's not really very strong hope. That would be a lack of faith. So, but anyway, so just to kind of wrap again, thank you for staying the extra few minutes. At the end of the message, he says, "You will triumph only if you're inspired by charity and sustained by faith." So, happiness, really achieving happiness, is the triumph. That's what we're looking for. Sacrifice is needed, right? It's that sacrifice of selfishness, pride, vanity. He says, and faith, even though you might think it's, faith in belief is not needed, but faith in trust, faith as trust is believed. It is absolutely required, and that's easy when you're inspired by agape, right? You're inspired by love. You're inspired by that feeling of love for humanity, of being charitable. So I thought it was a pretty good message to think about. I hope it was helpful. I hope it raises some questions. I hope it makes people go research a little more. These are some good passages for me to read. As we say here, the first person that hears the words is the person who's speaking. And even before I spoke, I had to actually study this. So I hope that you guys got a little bit of what I got. It was a pretty good study for me. So thank you all. Have a good evening. And I'm not sure. Somebody's going to come here to say what's next. Okay?
Pretty good. Lots of things to think about. Excellent. Well, today we have a lot of fans here. Okay, so we get to the end of our meeting. We'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you, the ones who were at home watching. If there was someone, I know that the lady was. I know that Dora was at home and here at the same time. She was texting. Yeah, thank you all. Let's do our final prayer, and then after that, we're going to have the passes, so that we can finish our meeting. And if you want, we can close our eyes so that we can focus even more and feel the love, feel the faith, and feel the hope that our dear friend and Master Jesus came here to show us, so that we could and we can one day be really considered His disciples by loving more and more one another. Dear Jesus, we would like to open up our hearts and our minds so that we can receive from you all the blessings that you are throwing at us at all times, but that so many times we close ourselves to them and we don't receive them. So help us. Help us open up our hearts, our minds, our souls, so that we can, together with you, with the good spirits, put your message inside of ourselves, so that when we walk, when we talk, and when we act based and guided by you and by your message. May your love surround all of us, not only the ones who are here, but the ones who we think about, the ones who live together with us, our friends, our co-workers, and everyone that walks the walk with us, so that we all can, with your help, make this place a better place, make this world a better world, make our world a better world. May God bless us all, now and always. So be it. So with this, we finish our meeting. Next month we're going to be back with another lecture in English. Meanwhile, every Monday we have our regular meetings in Portuguese. Every Saturdays we have our meetings in Portuguese at the same time at 7 p.m. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon, or girls. I don't see any guys here, so it's just girls.